Hi and welcome to episode 11 of our daily webinar series, Mental Health and Wellbeing in COVID-19. My name is Theron Nidenfit and my colleague Mark Baker is with us as always on the call. How are you doing today, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well this side. Hey, yeah, can't wait to jump into some of the content for today.
Yeah, this is one of your areas of speciality, hey? Stress and the impact on the body. So I'm sure the viewers are going to be in for a treat. Today's webinar is taking control of your mind and body, and we're going to be unpacking some of what we've shared in the past around stress, and we're going to be taking that to the next level. In our previous webinar, we actually, just to give you a bit of a recap on some of the concepts. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words here today. We looked at thinking fast and slow. We looked at the idea of what you see is all there is, that the way you see the problem is the problem, and we gave some tips and some tricks around how we can change the way we see our reality. And of course, the key question that we asked there was, how do we change the way we see each other? We come to different moments with a specific lens on the other person or on the moment, and there are ways that we can actually help to shift our perspectives on what we see. So let's dive into today's webinar. We're going to be speaking about, as I mentioned, taking control of your mind and body. We're going to I always forget to mention this, but we have a guest later on in the episode, and I will introduce her in more detail then. But today, as we look at what does it mean and how do we take control of our mind and body, we're going to be looking at, as I said just now, I think the physiology around stress, the heart-brain connection, and how we can cope with some of the stuff that goes on actually with this connection in our bodies. And then, of course, the really important role that EQ techniques have to help us remain healthy. Mark, take us away. Tell us a bit of a refresher here around stress and take us forward.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited, Theron, because one of the things that often doesn't get spoken about in stress is actually why is it a problem? People talk about the results of it and scary statistics about it, which we did in one of the previous episodes. But actually, what's happening with us? So, in one of the previous episodes, we had a look at these three different ways of viewing stress. The stimulus approach, which comes from engineering, load, strain, etc. The response way of viewing stress, which is the physiological response of our bodies. And then the transactional model of stress, which has got to do with psychology. There's a transaction between us and the way we view the world and what's happening in the world around us. Now, if we take all three of these models, essentially, irrespective of how we view stress as individuals, there is this thing called the stress response that I want to speak to today in this webinar. And it's going to be a little bit physiological. So if you, Theron, you and I were in matric biology together. Can you remember those days? I mean, unbelievable. But if you didn't do matric biology and you're listening in, just sit up a little bit in your seat so that this stuff doesn't fly over your head. But I just want you to get the principles, not so much the biology, but I want to use the biology to convince you of how powerful the technique can be that we're going to get to. So let's talk about the stress response. Now, essentially in our bodies, we have got these two systems that happen. The one is called the sympathetic nervous system, and that's kind of like the accelerator. Think of it like in our bodies, we have like an accelerator in a car. We've got an accelerator for all sorts of things. It speeds up our breathing, our heart rate. It stops digestion, It helps us to retain content. If you've ever started sprinting away from something, you'll know it's very difficult to go to the loo while you're sprinting because you retain all your content. So this comes from the sympathetic nervous system, and it is the accelerator of the body, okay? Then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like the brake, okay? It's like the brake pedal of the body. Breathing slows down, our heart rate slows down, we end up digesting, we resume digestion, and we can empty our contents. And this is when you're relaxed and you're calming down a little bit. So there's these two systems on the go, and we all haven't had an experience of this. If ever you go for a run around the block or you get a fright, that is, of course, the accelerator. All the stuff for the accelerator is needed. Whenever you've gone to sleep at night, well, that's when the brake pedal is needed, the parasympathetic nervous system. So this is all just very normal ways that our nervous system functions. Now, I want to show you how that starts connecting to the brain, because what we're going to look at is how our heart and our brain actually cause this accelerator pedal and this brake pedal to coexist in the body, and how it's a very rough ride, Theron, if we're pushing them both at the same time. So let's have a look at what's happening in our brain. Now, you'll be familiar with a picture similar to this. We were introduced to the hypothalamus, the thermostat of the brain, when we spoke a little bit about emotional addiction. We also spoke about the pituitary gland, the little black section there, the bartender of the brain. And we've spoken a little bit about these emotional centers of the brain. Now keep the thermostat and the bartender in mind, because I want you to see that the thermostat and the bartender, the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, are involved with the adrenal system. And those, of course, are those little adrenal glands right down by the kidneys. And the adrenal cortex, the outside of the adrenal gland, is responsible for cortisol. That's the stress hormone, which helps us to run far. You know, when we were all cavemen, Theron, we didn't only need to run away from the lion right now, we needed to keep running for a long way. You can't run 2 meters away from the lion, it's still going to eat you, okay? And then the adrenal medulla is responsible for adrenaline. And adrenaline is run now. And we've all experienced adrenaline. If everyone's given you a fright, or you've come across a scenario that's been quite shocking for you, you get that hit of adrenaline, and that's the run now hormone. And so the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are the ones that send the signals to tell the adrenal glands to do their thing, to run far and to run now. Of course, when we're involved in normal life and we just get simple emails, we can't be having these hormones pulsating through us all the time, because then we're not actually using them for what they were intended for running away. And that's where some of the health issues start coming from in terms of stress. And so what I want to show you is that essentially what controls these systems quite a lot is something called the heart-brain connection. And what has been found in some of the research, and I'm referencing the research now from someone called Roland McCraty. He works in close association with the Institute of Heart Math. But what they found is that because the heart is the biggest oscillator in the body, an oscillator is just a regular thing that pulses, it has a massive impact on our nervous system, on this accelerator and brake pedal. The accelerator and brake pedal is actually taking its cues from the heart. And what they have found is that the heart actually has something that they call the little brain inside of it. It has a memory. It seems to be able to have certain nerves that tell the brain what to do. And so an example of this is that, you know, more than 60% of patients in some of McCraty's research with sudden onset arrhythmia, in other words, the heart suddenly starts beating in a funny way, develop psychological symptoms of panic disorder. So they're panicking, but it's not because there's anything to panic about. It's because the body is taking its cue from the heart. And so what becomes possible to see there is something called heart coherence. And I want to just take you to the next slide and show you what that is. Heart coherence is when the heart is out of coherence on the left-hand side, when there is low coherence. It looks a little bit like there's a storm going on. If you imagine there being, that's like storm waters. And on the right-hand side, when it's in high coherence, it looks nice and calm and smooth, the waves that are coming from there. And where this heart coherence comes from is something called heart rate variability. And let me show you just a picture of what that is. Our heart is beating, we think it's beating at a normal beats per second, but actually there's a slight millisecond fluctuation in the different time between our heartbeats, Theron. You can see it over there. This is 2.5 seconds of heartbeat data. And you can see the first time between the first beat, there's 70 beats per minute, you can see. Then it's 70, once that's 75 beats per minute, then it's 83 beats per minute. So these slight fluctuations are signals from the heart that it sends to the brain to say either you need to accelerate or you need to slow down. And when these are uneven, like we're seeing in this picture, it's as if we're driving our physiology with the brake pedal and the accelerator being pushed at the same time. And that is a very stressful position for our bodies to be in. It's as if the bartender and the thermostat don't know what to do, and so it leaves us constantly in a state of that kind of storm water in our bodies, which is of course very unhealthy for us. I just want to make some space for you, Theron. I don't know if you just want to comment on any of that.
Yeah, so I mean, I find this stuff very interesting. It's super fascinating. As you mentioned before, it may be a little bit inaccessible to some, but I think the heart of what you're saying is that there's this connection between the heart and the brain, and these different places in the brain. And when the information that is being sent from the heart to the brain, when that is erratic, when that is not, when the variability is not like, imagine a drummer who can play the song with a perfect beat the
Brilliant
entire way
analogy,
through.
yeah.
But this is, imagine when you're in a time of stress, your heart's a little bit like a drummer that's sort of like speeding up and slowing down, and every beat is different, and that throws the whole band into disarray. Nobody really knows, sorry to add another analogy into this driving analogy, but what happens then as a result is that the brain sort of speaks to the body to activate the accelerator and the brake at the same time, and it just puts you in a less than ideal physiological space, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Theron, let me jump in because, while this sounds all scary, this is actually the normal way that many of us are operating and living our lives. When we put people onto heart monitors, we see low coherence, low heart coherence in most people. So this is not an unnatural way of being, but it's just not a very healthy way of being. Same scenarios happening on the outside, and we can have this low coherence or high coherence. And so, of course, we're not here just to talk about low coherence, Theron. We want to talk about how we can fix it. And so I want to just jump across now and start sharing with you one of the most simple stress management techniques, which is a breathing technique. And right underneath many of the different mindfulness techniques or breathing techniques that you might have come across is actually a manipulation of this heart rate variability so that we can get ourselves into a state of high coherence, so that our brain is telling our bodies everything is okay. Even if it's not, we can get our brains through the heart-brain connection to say to our bodies, everything is actually okay. And so even though things on the outside are not doing too well, we can make it that things on the inside are going pretty well. And that's going to give us a much better way of responding to the world around us. So let's have a look at this technique. It's a breathing technique that involves 2 steps. The first step is something called heart breathing. And this is a very a structured way of breathing where you count your breathing for 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. I like to do it literally with a little ticking clock on my iPhone, Theron. I look at a ticking clock and I count in for 5 seconds, long, slow, deep breaths, and then out for 5 seconds. And I imagine the breathing happening through my heart. That's quite important. You fix your mind on your heart, you do that heart breathing. And then the second step is positive feeling. And this is where you bring into your mind any wonderful memory, moment, or anything that you're grateful for, and you literally stew in the positive feelings of that moment. I often think of little children that I've spent time with where they're giggling, and that gives me that positive feeling. Or I think of time with my cats or with my wife, Robin. So anything that's going to give you that positive feeling. So this technique can be radically powerful in terms of creating high heart coherence, which is what we want to cope with stress.
Which is essentially trying to get those beats of the heartbeat exactly perfect. It may feel like they are, Mark is telling us they're not, and when we can do this regular breathing in and out like this over a 5 second cycle up and down, what we can see is we can actually walk the heart into a more healthy way of being and beating, which then gives us resources.
Let me jump in, Theron, because a way I like to think of it, this is not actually how it happens, but it's almost like using your lungs to regulate the heart, the beating of your heart, so that your heart-brain connection tells your body everything is okay. Even if in the world around you things are not so okay, because then your body responds to the world as if everything is okay, and we mitigate some of the major devastating effects of stress on our body, on our minds, on our psychology, on our way of coping with the world.
So what we were thinking about as we were prepping for this webinar was, how can we actually show this to you? Because we have a heart rate monitor that we use at Mygrow, and there's software, etc. And we thought, what better way to do this than to actually just take a snippet out of one of our Mygrow droplet videos and actually just show you. So we're going to show you a 2-minute section that comes from the Mygrow droplets, from our product, from the stress management module, where we take 3 of our different colleagues at work and we walk them through what this process will look like. And you'll actually see this. These are the actual readings from them practicing these techniques with this heart rate monitor connected to their ear. So watch this short video and then we'll keep chatting about it afterwards.
Let's take a seat. This is Mel. This is Elaine. Careful of knocking that back. Camilla, she's part of the research team here at Mygrow. It's great to have you here, Mel. We, of course, going to be putting Elaine onto this M-Wave heart monitor, the little infrared monitor. It'll take her pulse through her earlobe. If you can just pop that on, that'll be great. You've got a pulse. This is a very good sign. It means we've still got you for a while, which I'm glad about. And what you can see here, this is an output, remember, of the heart rate variability. It's measuring the difference between the time between your different heartbeats, which is being aggregated here into this coherence measurement. So sit right back in your chair, sit nice and comfortably, okay? You might want to put your fingers just on your heart just to feel where it is. And all I want you to do is close your eyes, and I'm going to talk you through the technique. You can just breathe quite casually, starting to take long, slow, deep breaths. And remember, the first part of this technique is heart breathing. You're going to imagine yourself actually breathing through your heart. Go ahead and take a nice deep breath, fill your lungs 100%, and then all the way out. And I'm going to start counting for you. Once you're all the way out, let's breathe in together, heart breathing for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice and slow this time. 2, 3, 4, 5, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's excellent. Keep counting in slowly, evenly, and deeply, and then out for 5 seconds, slowly, evenly, and deeply. And then when you're ready, while you focus on your heart breathing, I want you to bring into your mind a wonderful memory, a wonderful moment, and allow yourself to experience all of that positive emotion again. With each breath you take through your heart, imagine your heart pumping all of those good hormones around your body again. So when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
All right, so Mark, do you want to add to that at all? Do you want to walk the viewers through what it is they just saw and sum it up for us before we move on?
Yeah, thanks, Theron. I mean, we put all three of these guys on the heart monitor, as you saw. You can see on the left-hand side of the 2 green lines, before they started the breathing, there was that stormy water in terms of the heart rate variability. And then what happened is their breathing started taking control of it. You can see that. And then as soon as they started doing the positive feeling part of the technique, you can see how their heart rate variability just became nice and even over there. And all we're seeing is 2 different kinds of humans for each of them internally. On the left-hand side, we're seeing 3 humans where their heart-brain connection is saying to their body, everything is not okay. On the right-hand side, within a 5-minute period, they were able to just get their heart-brain connection saying to their body, everything is okay. And this radically changes the way that they were able to view and interact appropriately with the world. So just that technique again, Theron, it's heart breathing, 5 seconds, long, slow, deep breaths in, and then 5 seconds breathing out. And then the positive feeling, inducing through our thinking, a way of stewing in the positive feelings of a wonderful memory or something we're grateful for or anything that's massively meaningful in our lives. And you'll be able to see this on, I think we've got this technique on the daily checklist, Theron, in the resources section. This is that breathing part of that daily checklist that we're talking about.
Yeah, and you can actually see just from this graph just how powerful, as we've been saying so often, the positivity, what that can actually do. Here you're seeing it physically in your heart rate variability. We're going to jump onto this call now and get our guest on for today. So Mark, I will see you in a second. Okay.
Great.
Nkateko, can you hear us? You're on the
I
line.
can hear you very clearly. Thanks.
Perfect.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the webinar today. We're looking forward to everything that you're going to be able to share with us. I just want to dive in straight and just ask the question for you. You're obviously on the front lines dealing with clients and helping them through this time. How are you supporting them? What information, what advice are you giving them about practical ways that they can reduce their stress and really get on top of this mind-body connection and how to stay healthy in this time. What kind of advice are you giving to your clients?
And obviously, especially because of the lockdown and the coronavirus crisis, it has been hard for people to be able to move around. And in most cases, with the connection of the physiology and mental health, the go-to will always be active, so that you clear the bloodstream of the cortisol and increase the endorphins in the bloodstream, because those are the feel-good hormones versus the cortisol, which are the stress hormones, as we've had earlier on. So it has been challenging for many people to stay active, especially in confined spaces. I think there are people who are still a little bit privileged to be in a bigger space where they can be able to move, but there are many people who live in apartment blocks or who share living spaces, and it's not so private. But I still maintain the fact that keeping moving and getting your blood to pump to release those stress hormones, it's actually the best way to go about in this time, be it climbing up and down the stairs, be it running on the spot, be it skipping a rope, doing a few cardiovascular exercises, the jumping around and so on. So there's many things that people can still do even in the so-called confined spaces with the gym closed and the streets closed on us to be able to walk the dogs and be able to jog.
Well, I must say, just looking at my dog, my poor dog is feeling like, it's really, this shutdown is taking its toll on the dog.
I can imagine.
But what a great reminder for us of the power of just the body, what we've been sharing in this webinar is that there really is a connection between the mind and the body. And what you're sharing with us now is that actually by exercising, by getting the blood flowing, by using our muscles, we can actually really contribute to the well-being and to the flourishing that can come out of a time like this, when our default maybe to just laze around and stop our exercising and things like that, because it's so much harder to do when you can't go to the gym. Is there anything else that you can say, that you could share with us? What other advice are you giving to your clients as they're dealing with some of these stresses? Or maybe I could ask, what are some of the dynamics or the stresses that some of your clients are sharing with you? Obviously keeping it confidential, but what are people going through, and how can they, do you have any other tips to how to respond?
I'm looking at people who are staying by themselves. Statistically, it has been shown, obviously in the South African context, it's not so much the case as it is overseas, but more and more people are staying by themselves. So I have been seeing people who are staying by themselves who are saying, you know what, I do enjoy my time alone. I'm an introvert, and I will start on another conversation with extrovert. They are having it very, very, very hard. But a person will say, I'm an introvert, I enjoy my own time and so on, but right now I'm particularly feeling lonely. So the loneliness starts to kick in versus being alone. Being alone is when you're still enjoying your space by yourself, but being lonely, it's something else. It's an emotional emptiness where, the human interaction element has been taken away from us in this time. So those are some of the issues. And the other issues is, especially with people who already had underlying mental health issues, depression, anxiety, it's now being exacerbated. It's not becoming any easier for people. Some people might not even be aware that at this time they can still see their psychologist, they can still see their psychiatrist, they can still see their physiotherapist, and so on. And, they are very much still in a corner to think that they are alone, that they, because of the isolation or the self-isolation, that they are isolated by virtue of the self-isolation. So most of the time it's just to encourage people to reach out to family members, to reach out to friends. There's many virtual activities that we can do. I'm sure you have seen some of them coming your way, with teams, with groups, with friends, with family members. And that also get us to move with other people. The other day, somebody posted on their status to say, today it's particularly hard for me. And I think it was just day 5 or day 6. for them. And I said, let's have a virtual dance date with the kids, where the kids were doing a Zumba exercise, and then we connected with them. So they did their YouTube on that side, and then we did their YouTube, and then we just, mirrored each other. And it was quite fun. I think it was something that was supposed to last for about 7 or 10 minutes, but it ended up lasting for 20 to 25 minutes, and then it made somebody's day. But that is also just because of that movement, and the movement that was connected to connecting with other people.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. I know that nearly every group that I'm part of out in the real world in normal times, they're all trying to get into a virtual kind of space so that we can stay connected. I must be honest, while I love it, it's been a bit overwhelming. It's added a little bit of a level of stress and anxiety to me, because there's so much going on, not just for myself, but for my wife as well. And of course, the kids now at school, they're having all sorts of online things. I know a lot of my colleagues are struggling with this. So there's definitely an upside and a downside to this. And I think the wisdom is how do we figure a middle way?
Yeah, the balance needs to be there, where you are now, these things that are supposed to help us, they are not now overwhelming us, because it can be so easy. I think it was Dr. Rouvier in one of the sessions when he was talking about stress and anxiety, talking about how actually being on social media and being always connected. And I think you made a comment in line of that, to say you have tried to monitor and control your engagement with the internet and the social media. But then sometimes we falter on that, while we think we want to safeguard and make this space sacred, especially the home environment, to be sacred and not to be contaminated with the outside world, because that's what it is. It's the outside world coming into our homes, coming into our bedrooms, into our spaces, into our living room, into our bathrooms. I mean, I sometimes take my phone with me to the bathroom for music, so it's such an invasion that if we don't create a balance and become aware of how these gadgets are, they actually bring about, or can bring about, an imbalance where they were supposed to bring a joy. So it's just a constant self-monitoring that needs to happen, especially for people who are already anxious. I will say the first thing is to actually filter what you are taking in. Yes, information is very key to know this novel virus in terms of how it acts, how we become infected, and so on. It's very key to be knowledgeable, but then it's something else to be overly informed and overly stimulated to a point where we can drive ourselves to be more anxious than getting the right information or the correct information. And just to actually acknowledge that reacting in a way that is stressful and anxious, it's actually normal given the crisis that we are dealing with. But then coming back to being aware of how are you reacting, the physiology of your body. Is your heart racing? Are your palms sweaty? Is your brow becoming a bit sweaty, and so on? And be able to manage that on a physiological level.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your input today. We're going to have to leave it there. We're always really conscious of time on these webinars, but thank you so much for everything you've shared. And I want to wish you luck as you continue to navigate this with your clients, as you continue to support them. And of course, in your own life, we're all in this together. Of course, we're all needing to deal with this moment as well. So thank you so much.
Most definitely. Thank you for having me. And I also wish the best to all the listeners in terms of going through this time. We are all in all this together. We have each other's backs, and the support is there and help is there.
Well, that was Nkateko giving us the benefit of her wisdom and her insight from some of her work that she's been doing with different clients. Mark, it's always so great to hear from other psychologists and to see that there's so many people on the front lines really just giving support and help. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this webinar before we sign off?
Yeah, I thought that was great, Theron. It's something that stood out for me is just remembering that saying that some things are so easy to do that they're easy not to do. And, that's so true for something like this breathing technique which is on the daily checklist in the extra free resources on the Mygrow subscription. And if people do this every day, they really are going to be training their heart-brain connection to be sending a message out to their body that everything is okay. And this really can be quite life-changing for people. So yeah, I'm really hoping that we're all going to go and do it.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being with us. If you haven't yet had a chance to go sign up, I know I say this every time, but please head on over to mygrow.me and sign up for the free trial if you haven't yet. On the platform, you'll obviously have access to some of these resources that we've been mentioning, and you'll be able to see some of the reruns, some of the replays of all the webinars that have gone before. Just go down to that little COVID-19 tab on the left. In there you'll find a whole lot of resources, tip sheets, all sorts of things to really help you cope in this time. Mark, one last thought from you before we wrap up for the viewers.
No, just all the best. I'm going to go do my breathing technique now, Theron.
Okay, good one. All right, you may be alone as you go through this, you may be with others, but we're all in this together, and it is so helpful, it is so beneficial to know that there are certain very practical things we can do to give ourselves a better shot at handling the stress of these times. Thanks very much. We will see you in the next webinar.
Cheers for now.